August of 1862. You and I, we are in the 24th New York Volunteer Infantry, and the Second Battle of Manassas is underway. You and I, we're about to assault entrenched Confederate positions on the other side of this field. Lucky us. Now, how will we fare? We're about to find out. Will we have some success here, or will this battle lead to another early Union debacle here at Manassas battlefield? So to set the scene here, at noon on August 30th of 1862, General John Pope, thinking the Army of Northern Virginia was beginning to retreat, issued orders to Major General Fitzporter's 5th Corps and elements of the 3rd Corps to attack the center of Stonewall Jackson's line, who was holding an unfinished railroad cut in this direction. Now, the railroad cut would offer some pretty good protection for the Confederate forces, and it turns out it is the perfect defensive position if that railroad cut is unfinished, which this one was. Now, if you've ever been to Gettysburg's railroad cut, it's pretty deep, and when the enemy gets close, it kind of worked against the Confederates that were entrenched in there. But this railroad cut isn't as deep, and we're about to find out. It was the perfect defensive position for the Confederate forces in this field before us here. I would say maybe about 200 yards away. So let's start our march. Now, starting at 3 p.m., nearly 10,000 Union soldiers would begin this attack. Now, for us in the parking lot, it's about 200 yards like I just stated, but during the time of the battle, Fitzporter's men would have had to advance across nearly 600 yards from one side to the other. And they were crossing this field here before us under heavy artillery fire. Now, the Confederates had artillery placed all along this area here behind the ridge, and Longstreet's guns were just wreaking havoc on the advancing Union soldiers here, who have little to no cover. Now, you can kind of see the ground slopes up a little bit, and maybe that would offer some cover from some small arms fire. However, the artillery fire, it was zeroed in on this location, and the Union forces paid for it dearly. Now, I've walked Pickett's Charge, I've walked in the footsteps of the Florida Brigade at Gettysburg. I've done a few of these walks, and I don't know, something feels a little different about this one. I mean, all these long charges across open field, I mean, you understand the overwhelming odds, but for some reason, I get the overwhelming sense that the Union had no chance in this fight. And the fact that this attack was launched just shows you maybe Pope was a little disconnected, or he was just so desperate for a Union victory. But I just couldn't imagine. I mean, we're about halfway across now, and just the sounds of the artillery, hearing the screams, the gunfire. I mean, I don't know how these men just kept on advancing, and they kept coming. And they're about to reach the railroad cut here, which astounds me. Now, in this general area, the Confederate forces consisted of the 1st, 2nd, 9th, 10th, and 15th Louisiana infantry, and they were part of Stafford's brigade. And they were entrenched in that railroad cut, and there were multiple accounts from the Union that stated along the top of the railroad embankment there was a gleam of musket barrels as they were aimed towards us and resting upon it. Behind each musket was a slouched wool hat and a pair of eyes under its brim. That was all we can see from the enemy. Unbelievable. So we're almost, I would say, we're about 75% of the way there. And I'm a little out of breath. I brought the backpack along and loaded it down. It's probably about 40 pounds. I wanted to feel fatigued when I got up there. I wanted to get a sense of what these men that made it would have felt like. And now they have to fight. It isn't just like what I'm doing, marching across the field with a camera. I have no stress right now. Gosh, no matter how much I try, I just can't imagine it. So we're essentially, I would say, about 20 yards from the railroad cut now. So what you're seeing here is a Groveton monument, and that was placed here in 1865 honoring the Union dead. Now, there's a similar looking one on the first Manassas battlefield. Like I said, just before the railroad cut here. And I have an account for you from the 13th New York Infantry. The rebel infantry poured in their volleys, and we were scarcely a dozen feet from the muzzles of their muskets. Oh, it was terrible. For 20 minutes, the shattered regiments held the slope swept by a hurricane of death, and each minute seemed like 20 hours long. For 20 minutes, the bullets hummed like swarming bees, and then those yet alive and able to do so received orders to fall back. Who fell? The dead, dying, and the disabled held the field. And that was from Corporal John Slater. And let's have a look at this position here. Good Lord. Here is the unfinished railroad cut. I hope the camera is doing it justice because it's about 4 to 5 feet deep and it runs along this direction, continuing in that direction. Now the Union forces were able to have a small breakthrough, I believe somewhere near that tree line here, but it didn't last long because Confederate reinforcements were not far behind this location. So we're walking along what would have been the top of the cut here. And just envision this thing just full of Louisianians just pouring murderous fire into the Union troops here. And now, whatever is left is just clinging to the embankments here on the railroad cut. Now those embankments are probably a little harder to see, but just imagine these soldiers, they're exchanging fire from feet away. You're laying on the embankment as a Union soldier. You pop your head above the cut, deliver a round into a Confederate's chest, and then you're in bayonet range. There's hundreds of Confederates in this cut. I don't understand how anyone even survived. Give you an example of just how thick the air was with lead. The Confederate forces in this section of the cut, they were running low on ammunition. Some of them had no ammunition at all. So I have a question for you. You're a soldier in a defensive position. The enemy soldiers are within feet from you. You're out of ammunition. What do? Do you scrounge around, try to find some cartridges from your dead comrades? Do you pull back, try to refit and assault the position you just abandoned? Or do you begin throwing rocks at the Union soldiers who are just mere feet away? That's what started happening right here. Confederate soldiers began taking up rocks and throwing them at the Union soldiers. Now, it's important to note, this rock fight during this battle had no significance on the outcome. I think we all know the outcome of this battle because of what the Union forces were assaulting. But I wanted to share this story because it's just one of those weird, quirky stories within the Civil War that you read about, and that rock fight took place right here. Now I have a few accounts from this section of the battle I want to share with you. Now Private O'Keefe of the 1st Louisiana Infantry is quoted as saying, "Boys, give them the rocks." And just like that, Confederate soldiers began grabbing rocks, similar to these ones before you, and hurling them at the Union soldiers just on the other side of the embankment. Now there's an account from the Union side that would state, "Huge stones began to fall about us, and now and then one of them would happen to strike one or another of us with very unpleasant effect. By this time, all my friends were on the rebel work at my side were badly wounded, and I had received a few scratches and bruises from my own part. The enemy kept up the showers of stones, and we were returning the favors to such extent as we were able." So now, you had Union soldiers begin hurling rocks back at the Confederate forces. Now, like I said, this had no significance on the outcome of the battle. It's important to note that. It's just one of those stories that is kind of fascinating. You think all the carnage that is unfolding on this field. This is the direction the Union soldiers were attacking from. And you can kind of see, here's the embankment here on the other side of the tree. You have the railroad cut. We're mere feet from each side here, and they're just delivering point-blank musket fire into each other's faces, essentially. And now we're throwing rocks at each other. Oh, man. These poor guys.